LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 29th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing here. I've picked out the weekend's 11 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which it'd be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. There's my clip list that these are my notes on my 11 clips. I put a link down in the video description. Actually, I don't think I did it for the recorded show, but for the for the live show, but for the recorded show, there will be a clip list. Maybe I'll even add that during one of the clips if I have time, because I did create the PDF. I just didn't create the link. My topic again is impeachment. What's going to happen next? Well, it's happy 2020. Is this the year that Trump loses? He may lose the election. He's probably not going to lose the impeachment trial if there is an impeachment trial or a removal trial in the Senate, which that's what the big questions are. Will there be witnesses? Will there be documents, the ones that Trump refused to allow but said he was going to allow in the Senate? If you're following along on my clip list, that's clip number 2 I'm going to show you is Trump back on December 3rd saying that he was going to allow all these witnesses when it got to the Senate. But there's also this question of whether Republicans are falling into a trap that I'll talk about a little more. That's all down in the video description of my topic, Happy 2020, the year that Trump loses, ? And I will get to that, but there's no real political comedy this week from Real Time with Bill Maher or Saturday Night Live. They're all off for a few more weeks, but I did find some political comedy with the panel discussion on CNN State of the Union, where Jake Tapper sort of juxtaposed the Christmas message from Donald Trump and Melania, and then the written message saying to be introspective in how we treat other people, and try to be more Christ-like. And then that's all juxtaposed with Trump's tweets that are anything, I don't know, I guess we don't know how Christ would have tweeted, but I don't think he would have tweeted as Trump does. And that's sort of the funny juxtaposition with sort of a Christmas Carol reference at the end of this 2-minute clip from CNN State of the Union this morning that I will start with over here.
The President and I want to wish each and every American a very Merry Christmas.
We give thanks for the millions of Americans who come together to care for others with compassion and bring the warmth and bliss of this holy season to our families, our friends, our neighbors, and to those in need.
A Christmas message from the President and First Lady. The President also saying in his statement, quote, "Together, we must strive to foster a culture of deeper understanding and respect, traits that exemplify the teachings of Christ," unquote. That sentiment lasted about 8 hours. Then President Trump took to Twitter. Take a look at some of the tweets the President sent starting Christmas Day. He called Democrats liars. He went after Speaker Pelosi quite a bit. He retweeted an unsubstantiated claim about the whistleblower's identity. I have to say, the idea of the President saying that we need to strive to foster a culture of deeper understanding and respect was an interesting one, Sarah. It's not one that I think it traits that exemplify the teachings of Christ, not necessarily the behavior of President Trump.
There was a game that used to be played sort of in early 2017 of did the President write the tweet or did some of his staff? And I think we sort of left that game behind. But I think when it comes to the Christmas message, I think we can solidly say that might have been drafted elsewhere in the White House.
So, and Naira, a lot of tweets attacking Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, a sign, I think it's fair that she has irked him by withholding the impeachment documents and also by going forward with impeachment. Take a listen to what President Trump said about Pelosi Christmas Eve of this year.
She hates the Republican Party. She hates all of the people that voted for me and the Republican Party. And she's desperate to do. Look, she got thrown out as Speaker once before. I think it's going to happen again. She's doing a tremendous disservice to the country. She's not doing a good job. And some people think that she doesn't know what she's doing.
And Merry Christmas.
Exactly.
In the
God bless
season of
us,
peace.
everyone. I think Tiny Tim said something similar to that. Just a fact check there. She didn't get thrown out of the speakership, although the Democrats did lose the majority once before, but she remained the leader of the Democratic Party.
There was the Tiny Tim reference there. There was a quick fact check from Jake Tapper. You'll see pretty much that same clip when I show the Fox News Sunday news summary, and they don't do any fact checks on it. And the thing that they also don't juxtapose it with, I like the way that Jake Tapper juxtaposed the Christmas message and being Christ-like with the non-Christ-like behavior of President Donald Trump, despite all of his evangelical support. But they didn't juxtapose that claim, Trump is saying Nancy Pelosi hates me, hates the Republican Party and all the people who vote for Republicans. Because remember, that was one of the things that got Nancy Pelosi upset when James Rosen, former Fox News reporter, now I think he's OANN report. No, Sinclair Broadcasting reporter James Rosen, which is even more right-wing than Fox News. He asked Nancy Pelosi if they're impeaching Trump because they hate Trump. And she said, I try not to hate anyone because of her Catholic upbringing. And she got very animated in her response. And no one brings that up with that clip of Trump saying that Nancy Pelosi hates all Republicans, which is even worse than just hating Trump, I guess, from Nancy Pelosi's point of view. I don't know, maybe you don't believe Nancy Pelosi's sincere, but she is a politician. I don't always believe she's sincere in everything she says, but it's hard to lose to Donald Trump in a sincerity contest, in my point of view. And I'm going to get to the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, which isn't really about the news so much as it is about disinformation and propaganda and the ways that it seeps into the news. And that was the topic of the entire Meet the Press, which down at a link in the video description, you can see the entire Meet the Press episode. It's kind of an interesting topic for Chuck Todd. I know he gets a lot of bad reviews from some of my live viewers about his ability to cross-examine and his gullibility, possibly when it comes to certain Republican talking points. And he actually did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine this week where he kind of admitted some naivete as to being used as a tool for Republican talking points. And I don't know, maybe that's why he did this whole disinformation episode, some of which I thought was good, some of which, like the New York Times guy, the executive editor of the New York Times, I have lost a lot of respect for the New York Times over the Trump presidency. They've done some good things, but not as good as the Washington Post. They also had the editor of I can't remember their title. Sorry, I didn't take any clips from that part. But one of the things they talk about propaganda techniques where the disinformation campaign, they don't necessarily want you to believe any one position. They're very willing to change their position, but there's such a barrage of positions that they're never held accountable for any one position that they take. And that before I show that Meet the Press news summary, I want to show this. It's about, I think it's a little under a minute clip from a news conference that Trump did back on December 3rd, where he talks about how, I'm not going to send any witnesses to the House of Representatives. I'm saving them for the Senate trial, which of course is now what's not happening. At least that's not the Republican position anymore. And so just to show how Trump is never held accountable for all the different things he says. He takes so many sides on every issue, as he has on impeachment witnesses. I wish this clip got a lot more play, and I will play it for you now over here.
When it's fair, it will be fair in the Senate. I would love to have Mike Pompeo. I'd love to have Mick. I'd love to have Rick Perry and many other people testify. But I don't want them to testify when this is a total fix. You know what a fix is? It's a fix. Just think of it. Tomorrow, I don't think anybody's going to watch. I'm not going to watch, but I'm going to be doing this. It's much more exciting. But you know what? Tomorrow, think of it. They get 3 constitutional lawyers, and we get 1. That's not even smart, because it's not going to matter. And they take 3, and they give us 1. Who ever heard of anything like that? No, but I want them to testify, but I want them to testify in the Senate where they'll get a fair trial.
So, but are they going to testify in the Senate? That's one of the questions that you'll see covered in some of the other news summaries when I get to them. But like I said, this next Meet the Press news summary I find particularly fascinating because for the people who've been subscribers or viewers of my channel for a long time, know that I've been doing this for about a dozen years, and for like the first half, it was almost exclusively media criticism, edited, produced videos, and a couple hundred Fox News bias videos. I would go through Fox News and I'd pick out all the propaganda, all the disinformation, and there are various things I've done in my past that gave me, I think, a special ability to do that, and I kind of have a natural ability to pick things apart that I used when I was a criminal defense attorney and did a lot of cross-examination and tried to pick apart the prosecution's case for my clients. And you have to understand how people create disinformation and create misinformation and the techniques they use, especially the 4Ds. I like the 4Ds in this news. Like I said, it's not really a news summary. It's a summary about how disinformation works that I think is well worth watching. Like I said, watch the entire Meet the Press episode at a link down in the video description. But this is the only Meet the Press clip I'm going to show you, because all the rest is like pundits talking about how disinformation has become a politicized weapon, and that's also covered in this summary that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
Good Sunday morning. I hope you're having a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and are enjoying this holiday week. You've probably never heard of a town in Macedonia called Veles. This is the town where BuzzFeed discovered what was essentially a fake news farm. Some 140 websites pushing out made-up pro-Trump, quote, news stories written for Americans, not to help to elect Trump, the candidate, but simply to make money on Facebook. Well, since then, the idea of fake news has become a growth industry, morphing from simply a get-rich-quick scheme in a former Yugoslav republic to a political weapon in our nationalized politics. The terms alternative facts and truth isn't truth debuted here on Meet the Press over the last couple of years, but these ideas are not new. Russia's government, for instance, now disorients its populace with so many versions of the truth, it creates what one former Russian TV producer called the fog of unknowability. Well, this morning we're going to hear from top players in journalism, diplomacy, and technology about combating truth manipulation and how Russian tactics have migrated right here to the United States. Citizens, of course, are complicit in the spread of alternative facts. We seek out information sources that affirm our worldviews, succumb to confirmation bias too often, and reject news we simply don't like. The danger is if we become lost in that fog of unknowability. If truth is pushed into a wood chipper, leaving us to say, I don't know what to believe, then alternative facts haven't just fought truth to a draw. Alternative facts may have already won.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
On the first full day of the Trump administration, the president directed his aides to insist on an easily disprovable lie about his inaugural crowd size, a touch point in an era when facts are under attack. Of course, twisting the facts is nothing new in politics.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yes.
That sounds a lot like this.
The truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth.
But the scale is new. As of December 10th, the president had made 15,413 false or misleading claims in office. That, according to the Washington Post. What's also new? The scale of the campaign against the press.
Just remember, what you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
In a Pew survey this year, just 30% of Republicans had a great deal or fair amount of confidence that journalists will act in the best interests of the public, compared with 76% of Democrats, a 46-point gap.
If you just listen to the mainstream media, it's pretty much slanted left.
Facebook remains the #1 social network for disinformation. Organized propaganda campaigns were found on the platform in 56 countries this year. In the U.S., 50% of Republicans had a great deal or fair amount of confidence that journalists will act in the best interests of the public, compared with 76% of Democrats, a 46-point gap. Facebook remains the #1 social network for disinformation. Organized propaganda campaigns were found on the platform in 56 countries this year. Facebook users shared the top 100 false political stories over 2.3 million times in the first 10 months of this year. Among them, Trump's grandfather was a pimp and a tax evader, his father a member of the KKK. And Nancy Pelosi was diverting Social Security money for the impeachment inquiry. Clearly, both false.
We don't stop people from posting on their page something that's wrong.
Mr. Trump is leveraging the polarized political climate.
There are 4 things that disinformation actors do if they want to attack their enemies or defend themselves against criticism. And you can think of them as the 4 Ds.
Number 1, dismiss. Attack critics to erode their credibility and invalidate the facts.
The fake news. Fake news. Fake news. Fake news. I think one of the greatest of all terms I've come up with is fake.
Mr. Trump has used the word fake on Twitter more than 800 times. Number 2, distort. If the facts are against you, make up your own facts.
In many places, like California, the same person votes many times. Not a conspiracy theory, folks. Millions and millions of people.
Number 3, distract. Whataboutism, or the I'm rubber, you're glue defense. If you're accused of something, accuse someone else of the same thing.
The phone call was perfect. The call that wasn't perfect and the words that weren't perfect were Joe Biden with respect to his son.
Number 4, dismay. Threats and intimidation.
We are going to take a strong look at our country's libel laws.
One real fear, if both sides normalize disinformation as a political tactic. In fact, in the 2017 Alabama Senate race, a group of Democrats did use online disinformation in the campaign against Roy Moore, circulating false evidence that Russian Twitter bots were working to elect Moore.
My big concern when it comes to disinformation is that we're going to see more and more people trying to do the same thing that the Russians did in 2016.
And joining me now is the executive editor of the Washington Post, Martin Barron, and the executive editor of the New York Times, Dean Baquet. Gentlemen, welcome to Meet the Press.
So, executive editors, those were their titles of the Washington Post and New York Times. That, and I am actually more a fan of the Washington Post than the New York Times, so I'm not going to go all into that. But I think that is a discussion kind of worth watching. A lot. I think it was pre-recorded. They didn't ask the executive editor of the New York Times about having published this vaguely anti-Semitic Bret Stephens article saying that Ashkenazic Jews are like smarter than other people, and citing, well, I actually saw the New York Times had taken out their reference to this 2005 paper that a white supremacist had posted on that issue. Anyway, that whole thing didn't come up. But a lot of the stuff was pre-recorded this week. So there wasn't coverage of this attack in New York, the stabbing of 5 Orthodox Jews at a Hanukkah celebration. Tonight is the last night of Hanukkah. That's one of the reasons I'm wearing this blue and white shirt in solidarity with Hanukkah celebrations, and that's why the next news summary I'm going to show you is from CNN's State of the Union, but it's not from the beginning where Jake Tapper says the State of the Union, because the State of the Union was like on edge and beware, or I can't remember what it was, and then he did a news report on what happened in that New York Hanukkah attack. But a little bit later, he did a brief news summary on just a little under a minute on impeachment issues, and especially on how there's a crack in, well, you'll see it starts off kind of like the political comedy I showed you, where it's just a little bit softer juxtaposition of Trump's Christmas message with his furious tweets against Pelosi, and then talking about Lisa Murkowski and how she has broken with Mitch McConnell, the Senate leader, and given some glimmer of hope to those who want an actual trial with witnesses and documents, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Politics now. The president sent a holiday message calling for understanding and respect this week, and hours later began to vent his rage at House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is still refusing to turn over the articles of impeachment to the Senate. There's been no apparent progress in the impeachment standoff, which centers on, in Pelosi's view, whether senators will agree to hear testimony from new witnesses. But One crack appears to be forming, possibly in the red wall of President Trump's GOP jurors in the Senate, from Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, who objected to Leader Mitch McConnell saying that he is working in total coordination with the White House on the Senate trial.
In fairness, when I heard that, I was disturbed. We have to take that step back from being hand in glove with the defense.
Joining me now is Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. He's a member of the Senate.
And I will have a clip of John Kennedy making some really bad points, showing just how dishonest some of the Republicans can be. But I think that Lisa Murkowski clip is important, and that's going to come up again in this news summary from ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos. John Karl was in, and this is actually from the very beginning of the program, where Jonathan Karl talks about how it's been 11 days since impeachment and we don't know what's going to happen in the Senate. Talks about Trump being infuriated by the wait, and also something about North Korea's Christmas present, which it's not that much of a news story. It's more of a non-news story, and I think this might be one of those media bias incidents that I've talked about on many occasions, where media outlets have a bias towards who their exclusive guest is, and you'll see they have Trump's national security advisor. Is it Robert O'Brien? I know his last name's O'Brien. I can't remember if his first name's Robert, but we'll find out after we watch the news summary here from Jonathan Karl on ABC News' This Week, with a lot of the same facts you just saw in the previous news summary over here.
Karl. Good morning and welcome to This Week on this last Sunday of the decade. It's been 11 days since the House impeached Donald Trump, and we still have no idea when the Senate trial will begin, or even if there will be a trial. That uncertainty has infuriated President Trump, who spent the holidays criticizing Nancy Pelosi for delaying a trial he believes would exonerate him. As negotiations over the trial play out, Democratic voters are preparing to cast the first ballots of the 2020 presidential campaign. All of this is happening as the United States is on high alert for a provocation from Kim Jong-un. North Korea initially threatened a, quote, Christmas gift for the United States that may now be a New Year's surprise. Joining me now is the president's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien. Ambassador O'Brien.
It was Robert O'Brien. He has like John Bolton's ex-job, but no mustache. And I don't know, he asked him some questions about John Bolton and John Bolton's criticisms of North Korea and all that's in there. But I don't know, the North Korea story is sort of like a non-story. It's like the Christmas present apparently was an empty threat. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's 4 days after Christmas. Maybe Kim Jong-un doesn't know when Christmas is, or something's going to happen. They said, well, still a threat, even though it didn't happen. I don't know. Is that media sensationalism? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And oh, by the way, I finally put the link down in the video description to my clip list. It's there even for the live viewers. If you refresh or whatever with the video player, I just inserted the link there if you are desperate to follow along on my clip list. And that was the penultimate news summary. There's one more news summary. It's clip number 6, if you're following along. It's the Fox News news summary, which, as I often say, looks like it could be written by the press office at the White House. It really stresses the White House points. You'll see Trump being infuriated. Dash and Sandy both in the room. I have a Dash and Sandy clip at the end, but I don't know. Maybe I'll try to take another one while I'm playing this 2.5 minute news summary from Fox News. Like I said, it's pretty soft on President Trump. It talks about how he's slamming Pelosi, but not really the context, and also shows that Pelosi hate clip without even the fact-checking that Jake Tapper did, and certainly not the juxtaposition with what Nancy Pelosi said about hate. And I'll talk about that a little more with you after we watch that clip together over here.
And hello
again, and Happy New Year from Fox News in Washington. The debate over the...
Oh, and I forgot to say, Chris Wallace isn't there. Mike Emanuel's the guest host. He's their congressional correspondent, and then it goes to the reporter Rich Edson. Sorry, I meant to say that before I show the clip over here.
And hello again, and Happy New Year from Fox News in Washington. The debate over the parameters of a Senate impeachment trial goes on this holiday weekend. President Trump spending it in Florida, slamming House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in a series of tweets about the process, which he calls very unfair. In a moment, we'll speak with the number 2 Republican in the House, Congressman Steve Scalise. But first, let's get the latest from Rich Edson at the president's Mar-a-Lago retreat in Florida. Rich?
Mike, President Trump is about halfway through his 2-week trip here in Florida. The president is now working in daily criticisms of the House Speaker, who led the effort to impeach him.
She hates all of the people that voted for me and the Republican Party.
And she's trying to force Senate Republicans to allow witnesses in any impeachment trial. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is still withholding House-passed impeachment articles, delaying a Senate trial. The president suggests Pelosi should focus instead on homelessness in California and face a primary challenge. Pelosi tweeted, quote, "The facts are clear and every witness told the same story. Despite the president's attempts to cover it up, President Trump abused his power for his own personal gain. Hashtag defend our democracy." Senate Democrats say if the president did nothing wrong, administration officials should have no problems testifying.
Give an answer to why we shouldn't have witnesses and documents. And he hasn't given a good answer. Plain and simple.
Republicans claim Pelosi's tactic, rush impeachment through the House and then delay a Senate trial, shows impeachment is a political charade.
There are not 2/3 of the senators willing to convict and remove the president. We all know how this ends.
Though there is some dissension among Republicans. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski told a local TV station she was disturbed to hear Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell say he was closely coordinating with the White House on impeachment trial strategy. Senior Republicans have pushed for a quick trial, though the president has said he wants a trial to examine Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter's conduct in Ukraine. Biden told the Des Moines Register Friday he would defy a subpoena to testify at the president's impeachment trial. Biden is now clarifying, saying he would honor any legitimate request from Congress, though he says subpoenas should really go to those responsible for shaking down Ukraine. He says that's the Trump White House. Mike?
Rich Edson reporting live from Mar-a-Lago. Rich, thank you.
They never mentioned whether Trump was doing any golfing, although apparently he did a significant amount of golfing, even though they got to report right from Mar-a-Lago. Like I said, a lot of that sounded to me like it could have been written by the Trump White House. They showed the Pelosi hates comment without any context. Of course, nobody showed that clip I showed earlier of Trump on December 3rd saying that when it got to the Senate, he was going to have all of his witnesses testify, but that wasn't just something lacking in the Fox News summary. That didn't come up anywhere. That's just something exclusively I showed you this week. Although I think a snippet of that was in one of the news summaries I showed you last week. And you noticed the focus on, they showed pictures of Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, and they're like carrying Trump's water or amplifying his message. The whole reason we're in this impeachment scandal is because Trump was trying to not get actual dirt on Joe Biden, but get the announcement of an investigation that he could use politically in his campaign. And that's still happening on Fox News. You'll see that when I show the Senator Ben Cardin clip later, where they bring up the whole Biden issue. They were the only ones to really bring that up with any of the guests this week. But before I get to that, I want to show the one CBS News Face the Nation clip I was going to show you. A lot of that was pre-recorded. They had this weird how prayer affects our politics discussion with Chris Coons and is he from Delaware? I think Chris Coons may be from Delaware, and then James Lankford from Oklahoma, a Democrat and Republican who are on a senatorial prayer group together, and it was all overly bipartisan in ways that were kind of icky to me. But you can watch that down in a link in the video description. I have a link to, I believe it's the Face the Nation YouTube channel, where all their segments get uploaded and you can watch them for free on YouTube. But the interview that I put Ivanka Trump in the title of my video as one of the two guests I wanted to highlight. And I thought that Margaret Brennan's interview of Ivanka Trump, it's like maybe they came up with these weird ground rules beforehand. There were no questions about impeachment. There were no questions about, with the whole Joe Biden and Hunter Biden thing and the way Trump has been going after Joe Biden for letting his family profit off his name. You'd think that question would come up, talking to Ivanka Trump, who's gotten like the patents from China while she actually works in the White House. And of course, that didn't come up in Margaret Brennan's interview at all. There were a couple sort of more confrontational questions. They talked mostly about the whole family leave, paid parental leave thing that Ivanka Trump has been championing, and in the National Defense Authorization Act that recently passed, they gave federal workers 12 weeks of paid family leave, which is a good thing. And it seemed like Margaret Brennan agreed to only talk about that most of the time. And she did ask this one confrontational question about how Ivanka Trump and her own organization hadn't given paid family leave. And she said, well, actually, all my employees have access to leave, which I don't know. Does that mean they're able to quit their jobs? That could mean anything. That's the clip I'm not going to show you. And then there was this somewhat more confrontational question when it came to, well, you're always talking about how families should be together, and then she starts to ask about Trump's family separation policy and all the kids who are still separated. But you can see it's still kind of soft-pedaled, where she says, but I know you were very vocal in opposition to family separation. Well, that is like giving her defense in the question. That doesn't seem like good journalism to me, but you can let me know what you think after we watch this is only like 75 seconds, and it's the only CBS News Face the Nation clip that we're watching together over here.
But it is important to note that thinking about caring for the next generation, the most important resource in this country, and of course the parents, it doesn't stop at 12 weeks.
Whenever anyone hears you talk about the importance of being with your children, they also think about your personal, and you were vocal in your opposition to the family separation policy when it came to immigration
Yes.
and the U.S. border. You said that was a low point for you.
Correct.
We went and looked, and Homeland Security says there are still around 900 children who remain separated from their families. Is that something you continue to remain engaged on when it comes to immigration?
Well, immigration is not part of my portfolio, obviously. I think everyone should be engaged, and the full force of the U.S. government is committed to this effort, to border security, to protecting the most vulnerable. That includes those being trafficked across our border, which this president has committed to countering and combating human trafficking in an incredibly comprehensive, aggressive way. So the full United States government has been focused on this issue, starting with the president.
Ivanka Trump, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And we will be right back with a lot more face.
So, like I said, that was pretty weak questioning, and Margaret Brennan, you saw there was no follow-up there when Ivanka Trump totally transitioned into, double speak 1984 style, national security, border security, anti-human trafficking, when what was really going on is kidnapping of kids from their parents, the family separation policy. I mean, in my mind, at least, in my personal opinion, that in itself is kind of an impeachable offense. That's not why Trump got impeached, but that's an abuse of power. That is, I mean, the kids are psychologically harmed for life by that separation of weeks, months, even years in some cases. And I at least give Margaret Brennan kudos for bringing up the 900 kids who are still separated and letting Ivanka Trump use her like border security talking points as a response to that, after talking about how pro-family she was in the whole rest of that interview, which, like I said, was pretty much a softball interview. That was one of the most contentious points, and not that contentious. You can let me know what you think about it down in the comment section. But now I'm going to go to the Fox News Sunday interview Well, Mike Emanuel, who was in for Chris Wallace, first he did this long interview of Steve Scalise where he let him get away with like the most egregious of the House Republican conspiracy theories when it comes to impeachment that you've heard over and over again about, you know, the basement testimony, behind closed doors, Republicans couldn't call their witnesses and all of that stuff. And, you know, it was more of a grand jury type situation. And now we're going to the trial in the Senate, and I'll talk about that more when I get to what John Kennedy and Chris Van Hollen say. But here is an example I was talking about earlier when I showed the Fox News Sunday news summary, talking about how they have this obsession with bringing up Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and doing Trump's dirty work for him, which was the whole point of the whole Ukraine scandal. And Fox News keeps bringing it up. And you saw how at the end of the news report from Rich Edson, he talked about Biden said that he wouldn't obey a subpoena to go before the Senate trial, and then later he said he would, but he didn't think it was that what he could say was relevant to what Trump did. And of course that's the whole thing, that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden don't have relevant evidence to give as to whether Trump abused his power and obstructed Congress, which are the impeachment articles. But you can see that Mike Emanuel in his interview with Ben Cardin brings the whole thing up. And I think Ben Cardin does an okay job of making the points that Fox News viewers need to hear, that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Republicans and Democrats in the Senate are largely lining up behind a shorter impeachment trial, but differ on whether or not to call witnesses. Joining us now is Democrat Ben Cardin of Maryland. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Mike, it's good to be with you.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer has been arguing for 4 witnesses in a Senate trial with ties to the White House. Yet former Vice President Joe Biden has said he will not testify at a Senate trial. Now he's saying he would, of course, obey any subpoenas sent to him. Still, do Biden's complaints about the process undermine Leader Schumer's negotiations with Majority Leader McConnell?
Well, first of all, the Senate has the sole responsibility for the trial, and we have a responsibility to have a fair trial. We need to hear from those who have the direct information about the president's call with the president of Ukraine, about the holding up of a presidential meeting, about holding up of aid. Those witnesses need to be heard in the United States Senate. I think what Leader Schumer is saying, let's have at least those witnesses testify along with the documents that would reflect exactly why the funds were held up, why a meeting was not allowed with the president of Ukraine, and exactly the context of the July phone call. I think that's a minimum for a fair trial in the United States Senate.
Isn't the reality, Senator, that Democrats had all the power and leverage in the House, but very little of it in the Senate? Just another example of how painful it is to be the minority party?
Well, in the House, of course, the president chose not to cooperate, but worse than that, he told the key witnesses not to testify before the United States Congress. He refused to allow documents to be produced. Never before an impeachment inquiry has that been done by the President of the United States. So you had unusual circumstances in the House. The Senate now has its responsibility. The House has sole responsibility on impeachment, the Senate on removal. It's our responsibility, and we would hope that our leader would want the Senate to operate in a fair manner and hear from the key witnesses and receive the key documents.
Alabama Senator Doug Jones is seen as the most endangered.
So, yeah, like I said, I think Ben Cardin did a good job of getting out why it is that Trump has been impeached, what it is that he did, how he abused his power, how he obstructed Congress, how he refused to give witnesses and documents to the House, which now should be seen in the trial by the Senate. Mike Emanuel, did you hear that follow-up question? Like, isn't this all just the pain of being the minority party now that it goes to the Senate? And in a way, that's almost like the epitome of the disinformation that Trump, the Republicans, and Fox News give you all the time. Because if you go by population, if you go by the popular vote, Democrats hold a majority of the population represented in the Senate, but there's so many rural states. All states get 2 senators. If you're following along on your, this is my ACLU handy pocket constitution from the ACLU that I always carry around and occasionally refer to when I'm committing legal analysis using my legal degree when I give my commentary. But this doesn't require a legal degree to know this point. So the thing is that every state gets 2 senators. It doesn't matter how many people are in the state, so that means California gets 2 senators, and Alaska gets 2 senators, and Rhode Island gets 2 senators, and big rural states, both Dakotas, get their own 2 senators, even though they don't have that many people. And so Democrats are actually, if you're talking about who the minority party is, it's actually the Republicans represent a minority of the population in the Senate. Democrats got like 9 million more votes than Democrats got 9 million more votes than the Republicans in the 2018 House races. That's why they have the majority, and even that they don't have as much of a majority as they should if it were just popular vote. And of course, Trump himself did not get the popular vote. He got like 3 million votes less than Hillary Clinton. And it's the Electoral College, another institution that is a minority, not majority institution. So anyway, that's one of the pieces of disinformation, if you go back to the Meet the Press news summary, that has been getting a lot of play by Republicans, especially when they talk about the voice of the American people is being overturned by this impeachment. It's a coup against the voice of the American people, when even Trump himself did not win by a majority vote. And I just wanted to point that out, was all like implicit in that Mike Emanuel follow-up question to Ben Cardin about, this is all the pain of being the minority party. Well, Democrats actually have a majority of the votes in the House, a majority of people's votes in the Senate, just not a majority of the Senate, because of the anti-democratic institutions that created the Senate. And the same thing with the Electoral College, is an anti-democratic institution that thwarted the will of the people. And you can tell me down in the comment section what you think about the legitimacy of that institution, and I will move on to my last 3 news clips. This is going to be Jake Tapper cross-examining John Kennedy, and John Kennedy making one of the stupidest analogies or metaphors for the trial, the impeachment in the House and the trial in the Senate, is the next clip. Then I'll get to John Carl talking to Chris Van Hollen, the Democrat, giving a much better description of what should be happening in the Senate trial. And then finally, the Andrew Yang clip. I know there's lots of Yang Gang people out there, and it's Andrew Yang talking about impeachment. Those are the last 3 clips, starting with this Jake Tapper clip, cross-examining John Kennedy, where, John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana, that actually is more of a swing state than you might think. They just re-elected a Democratic governor in Louisiana. John Kennedy himself, I believe, started his career as a Democrat and switched parties. And he said a lot of crazy things along the way. You remember a few weeks back, he was supporting the Crowdstrike DNC server conspiracy theory, that it was really Ukraine who may have hacked the DNC server, and he then retracted that and said he was wrong about that. In a subsequent clip I also showed in one of my clip roundups, well, here he's saying something really stupid. I want to say it before I show the clip, just in case I forget when we get to the end of the clip, where he says, well, when the House impeaches, it's kind of like the district court, and then the Senate trial is like the appellate court. Well, What's another word for the district court? If you're a lawyer like me, you know the district court is also called the trial court. The finder of fact is the trial court. And John Kennedy's smart enough to know that. He's using the words district court to hide how stupid his argument is, that I will talk about a little more after we watch that last CNN State of the Union clip for the night together over here.
All right, fair enough. Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Let's turn to politics if we can now. Obviously, the Senate trial is pending, although we don't know when. You have said, quote, my objective first and foremost is to be fair to both sides. You heard Senator Lisa Murkowski there. Were you also bothered at all when Majority Leader McConnell said there would be no daylight between him and the White House?
I think Senator McConnell is entitled to his opinion and his approach. So is Senator Murkowski, so is Senator Schumer, so is Senator Blumenthal. If you look, Jake, at the Constitution, the standing rules of the Senate, the essays and analyses by the Congressional Research Service, if you look at the case law, Nixon v. U.S., not Richard Nixon, a federal judge named Nixon. If you look at the case of Porteous v. Barron, what you'll see is that when it comes to impeachment, the rule is that there are virtually no substantive rules. It's not a criminal trial. The Senate is not really a jury. It's both jury and judge. The Chief Justice is not the judge. He's the presiding officer. There are no standards of proof. There are no rules of evidence. And every senator, unless we pass a new rule by 51 votes in the Senate, is entitled to approach it his own way. Mm-hmm. I think many positions by many senators are calcified. I can only speak for me. I'm going to keep an open mind. I want to be fair to both sides. When I thought that the House proceedings were unnecessarily unfair, and when the American people walk away from the Senate trial, if we ever have one, I don't want them saying, well, we were just run over by the same truck twice. Mm-hmm. It was unfair in the House and it was unfair in the Senate. I want people to think that it was a level playing field.
So you said earlier this month that in the name of fairness, you would vote, theoretically, to allow Democrats, Republicans, anyone involved in this trial to, quote, call any witness that they want in a Senate trial. Do you think that's the only fair way to do it, to allow Democrats, Republicans, those representing Trump, those House impeachment managers to call the witnesses they feel they need to bring?
Well, the first issue that the Senate's got to decide is whether we hear evidence or hear the case, if you will, based on the record. One point of view is that the House is sort of like a district court. And the Senate, once again, not a perfect analogy, but the Senate is more like an appellate court. And we hear the record as put together by the House. That is what happened in part in the Clinton proceedings. Originally, the Senate heard the prosecution and defense argue the case on the record from the House. Then they decided whether to dismiss. A motion to dismiss was defeated, and that's when the Senate decided to hear 3 additional witnesses. I think that's a pretty sound approach for us to follow. We had a unanimity in the Senate with respect to Clinton, but except with respect to Clinton procedure. But look, there are no rules here. For example, what's an impeachable offense? I think the precedent shows that not all impeachable offenses are crimes, but it also shows that not all crimes are impeachable offenses.
Right.
And he's like very folksy, and that a lot of what he says is true. And not all impeachable offenses are crimes. Not all crimes are impeachable offenses. That is definitely true. And the thing about senators not really being jurors, not being really criminal, not that the impeachment trial is not really a criminal trial, that is also true. But when he, like I said before, I showed the clip when he said, well, you know, what the House does, it's like the district court, and what the Senate does is like the appellate court. No, the district court is the trial court, and the Senate is doing a trial. It's not doing an appeal. That is like a totally bogus, made-up Republican. I don't even know where that talking point came from, but it should die a quick death because it's very stupid. And I mean, if there's any metaphor, it's the House creates the charges. It's like the grand jury, and then the Senate is like the petite jury, although it's not really a jury, it's not really a criminal trial, and a lot of the rules aren't set like John Kennedy said. So a lot of what he said is true, but that last part is pretty stupid. And what makes a lot more sense is what you're going to hear in this next clip from Chris Van Hollen. I showed him last week, also making a lot of sense on what may happen in the Senate and why it is important for the Senate trial to have documents and witnesses. He's talking to Jonathan Karl on ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and he cites their own poll saying that 70% of Americans want witnesses and documents to be in the Senate trial. The one thing that I question, and I questioned this last week, and I've tried to do some research on this, and a lot of the pundits and a lot of the hosts of these shows and the news summaries have been saying how Democrats need, if all the Democrats stay together, they need 4 Republicans to get 51 votes to decide whether there are going to be witnesses and documents. And it's true that Democrats need some Republicans, but I'm not sure whether they need 4 or 3, because if it's a 50-50 tie, normally the vice president, Mike Pence in this case, or Republican, breaks ties in the Senate. But in impeachment, John Roberts, the Chief Justice, is the presiding officer, and as far as I can tell, he is the one who would break ties, and he is much less he is a Republican, but he's not a reliable Republican vote for no witnesses, no documents, like Mike Pence would be. And so I'm not sure, just because I keep hearing it over and over again from the corporate news media doesn't mean it's right. I remain skeptical about the fact that they need 4 votes and not 3 votes, because of it's maybe Democrats only need 3 votes, but that's the premise of the question you see from Jonathan Karl talking to Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, I believe, who I think gives a good description of the Democratic strategy on impeachment in the Senate over here.
In fairness, when I heard that, I was disturbed. To me, it means that we have to.
Oh, sorry, and of course it starts with the same Murkowski quote where, she doesn't say she wants witnesses and documents. She's just a little bit upset about Mitch McConnell saying that they're going to be in lockstep with the White House on all, there's going to be no difference between the Senate's position and the president's position on these issues over here.
In fairness, when I heard that, I was disturbed. To me, it means that we have to take that step back from being hand in glove with the defense.
That's Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska expressing concerns about Senator Mitch McConnell's statement that he would work in total coordination with the White House at an impeachment trial. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland joins me now. Senator Van Hollen, that's one Republican senator, and as far as I can tell, the only Republican senator who has expressed concerns about that. But if you want to call witnesses at this trial, you're going to need at least 4 Republicans to join all the Democrats. Are you seeing any other signs of Republicans breaking ranks?
Well, John, that's the entire reason we're focusing on the importance of a fair trial, and all Americans, I think, understand that a fair trial means you get to call your witnesses. And Senator Murkowski put her finger on the big issue, right? Is Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, going to try to rig this trial right from the start, working in lockstep with the president and his lawyers, or is he going to allow a fair trial, which your own ABC poll showed 70% of Americans say that requires witnesses and documents. So that's exactly why we're having the conversation that we're having over these weeks, because, you know, we keep hearing President Trump say he's going to be exonerated. Look, if you have a rigged trial, there is no exoneration in acquittal.
But are you talking to others? Are you talking to Mitt Romney? Are you talking to Susan Collins? I don't even know who else is potentially there for you. Not even Murkowski is saying she wants witnesses. Are you going to get those 4 Republicans?
There are ongoing conversations. I think it's too early to say how those individuals will vote. But look, John, they're going to have to answer for the fact that they don't want to see any more evidence, right? Those who vote against witnesses and vote against documents are essentially telling the American people they don't want to see anything, they don't want to hear anything, and in doing so, you're really complicit in a cover-up. I think more of this information will come out over a period of time. We will eventually see more documents. We will find out the truth. And senators who vote to deny the American people the ability to hear witnesses and get additional evidence are going to be part of covering that up. And I think a lot of senators, when it comes right down to it, are going to have to think long and hard on that vote.
What's the bottom line here, though? If Republicans do...
And you'll see Jonathan Karl, if you watch the whole interview, goes into tactics there, and he misses what Chris Van Hollen said there, which is kind of this whole theory I came up with last week, and it's in, if you look in the video description, it's in my topic description this week, where I say at the end, are Republicans falling into a trap if they exonerate Trump too quickly in the Senate before further facts come out, making Trump's guilt even clearer? You know, Trump could lose in the courts and in public opinion in 2020, even if he wins this Senate trial that exonerates him too quickly, because like Trump's tax returns might come out showing him that he's really beholden to Russia. You know, all roads lead to Putin, as Nancy Pelosi said famously when she found out about this whole Ukraine scandal. And there's a court case as to whether John Bolton has to testify. And of course, John Bolton has a book coming out where he's going to want to start talking for his own personal profit, which is sort of another epitome of this whole scandal, where it's like personal profit over national security for people who are supposed to be, oh, so America first and for the national security of the United States. But we'll see what happens with that. But like I said, I thought Chris Van Hollen did a good job of making it really clear that this could be a trap for Republicans if they don't look into the witnesses and the documents, and then before the November election rolls around, the Supreme Court lets out all this information that makes Republicans in swing states like Cory Gardner in Colorado and Susan Collins in Maine and Tom Tillis in North Carolina and Martha McSally in Arizona, and well, we'll see what Lisa Murkowski does. She's Alaska's, I don't know if that's a swing state or a weird state, or do I even have any viewers in Alaska? You can let me know down in the comment section for the live show or the recorded show. But before I finish the show, I do also have Andrew Yang in the title of my program as a shout out to the Yang Gang. I did a few debate clip roundups. I think I did a debate clip roundup of the very first debate where I kind of criticized Andrew Yang for looking kind of like a deer in the headlights and not having a good answer. And in the last debate, you know, only 7 candidates qualified and he was one. And he's definitely like the most improved candidate when it comes to debate performance. And I think he has some good ideas, some things I disagree with, and I don't really like the way he frames impeachment in this final news clip. He misses the whole accountability necessary for the president and the need to get more information, and the way that like I was saying, this could be a trap for Republicans if more information comes out. He says he wants to, no one talks about impeachment, and he wants to get past impeachment. And then he talks about possibly pardoning Trump if he becomes president, for reasons that I kind of agree with, but kind of don't. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this final news clip. I do have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip. But this is the final news clip, the Andrew Yang clip talking to Jonathan Karl on ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking about impeachment and pardoning of Trump over here. Oh.
When it's fair, it will be...
Sorry, wrong clip. Here it is.
Okay, and you've had some interesting statements on impeachment. You say, first of all, nobody ever asks you about it out on the trail. You've suggested Democrats have spent too much time talking about it, but you support the impeachment of Donald Trump, correct?
Yes, I do support the impeachment process, but voters don't ask me about impeachment. They ask me about health care and child care and education and climate change. And the fact is, we need 20 Republican senators to have a change of heart or a change of mind in order for impeachment to be successful. So this strikes many Americans like a ball game where you know what the score is going to be. And until that changes, to me, we need to be focused much more on presenting a new and positive vision that Americans will get excited about. That's how we win in 2020.
So what's your advice for Democrats? Should they forego a Senate trial? I mean, if this is a ball game where you already know the final score and they're going to spend, it could be the better part of a month, maybe longer, on a trial on all these issues that you say voters don't care about, should they just forego the Senate trial? I mean, they've impeached him.
Well, we've impeached him, and if you're going to have the trial, you should make it happen as quickly and expediently as possible. I've already said that I think that the other candidates who are in the Senate, Senator Warren and Sanders and Booker and Bennett, should feel free to continue their campaigns during the trial, because the fact is we have an election to win later this year and a case to make to the American people.
And you've suggested that you would be open to pardoning Donald Trump if you were elected. Is that would you? Do you think that there should be a pardon issued for Donald Trump by whoever that wins if a Democrat wins in November?
My focus is on solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected and moving the country forward. And if you look around the world, unfortunately, it's developing countries that have fallen into a pattern of the new president or the new leader prosecuting and sometimes imprisoning the former leader. That's not a precedent that's been set here in the U.S. And to me, that's something that I would be interested in maintaining. It's not in the country's interest necessarily to look backwards. We need to look forwards.
So you would not want to proceed with prosecuting Donald Trump after he left office, and you would be open to a pardon? Or you think he should be pardoned?
We would have to see what the facts were. We'd have to see what the charges were and what the Attorney General advises. But my interest is in moving the country forward.
All right. Andrew Yang, thank you for joining us here on This Week.
So there's the Andrew Yang clip. And like I said, I think he isn't, when he says he wants to get impeachment over quickly, he's not recognizing some of the facts that may still come out that make Trump look even more guilty about putting his personal political interest over the national interest, which is definitely an impeachable offense. And I mean, to some extent, I agree with what Andrew Yang said there about how government shouldn't prosecute and persecute their political opponents. That's kind of why Trump shouldn't be asking the Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. And there was this one poignant moment in the whole Ukraine scandal where, what's his name? It's not Vladimir Zelenskiy, the president. It's his advisor. It begins with a Y. Yurvan. I don't have his name right, but when he was told by someone in the diplomatic staff that they shouldn't go after their political opponents from the past, that he said, "Oh, like you're asking us to go after the Bidens and the Clintons." So, I mean, that is an important principle that Andrew Yang is talking about. But also, when you have government officials that commit wrongdoing, there should be accountability. You know, I was a little disappointed in Obama that he didn't go after George W. Bush administration officials for torture when that was illegal and war crimes, really. And the only accountability they might have is if the subsequent administration went back and found officials accountable for their wrongdoing and their violations of law. And the thing that makes it especially unnerving and a violation of the idea that no one is above the law is the idea that the Justice Department of the Trump administration and of all administrations going back many years has this opinion, an Office of Legal Counsel opinion, saying that a sitting president can't be indicted for criminal wrongdoing by the Justice Department. But if they can't be indicted when they're president, and then there's this principle that they're pardoned or not prosecuted when they're no longer president, well, it's like a get out of jail free card for every president, which, I mean, for Nixon, there have been presidents that have engaged in acts that seem criminal. Nixon certainly, Reagan perhaps, and you know, the whole Iran-Contra thing that, and some people like Weinberger got pardoned by George H.W. Bush, I think it was, on when William Barr was Attorney General the last time. And the thing is, Donald Trump has engaged in more criminality than any modern president. Down in the video description, there are links to Michael Cohen's plea allocution, where he said he was directed to commit campaign finance felonies by Donald Trump, which of course is a felony, and maybe that is a felony indictment waiting for Donald Trump in the Southern District of New York if he doesn't win re-election in 2020, if Trump loses, getting back to the title topic of this live stream this week. And so anyway, my point is, and of course Trump also has committed obstruction of justice felonies in the Mueller report that never really got into the American consciousness, but there are multiple. If you go back to, there's a link in the video description to the evidence of the many different parts of the Mueller report in this graphic here from a lawfare blogger, that if it's like 3 red rectangles all the way across, that's like substantial evidence of obstruction of justice in all 3 elements. And there are multiple cases of obstruction of justice just in the Mueller report. I mean, Trump deserves to be impeached. There's no question about that. And possibly there'll be a real trial in the Senate that with witnesses and documents that, like I said, last week there's a narrow path by which Trump would actually be removed in a Senate trial if the evidence of guilt is so overwhelming, with like Mick Mulvaney and John Bolton and Michael Duffy, the OMB official, and that other OMB official. Those are the 4 witnesses that Chuck Schumer's asked for. If they actually corroborate the story that was like in the New York Times today about, and I criticized the New York Times earlier, but they had this story this week, today on Sunday, about how Trump did all these things to hold back the aid to Ukraine for the political investigations, just like he got impeached for by the House 11 days ago. So there could be a lot more facts that come out. Like I said, it could be a trap for Republicans if they exonerate him too quickly, and then more and more facts come out showing how guilty he is. That could be Nancy Pelosi's big political strategy here, and whether that happens, that it's all dependent on a what if more evidence comes out, and I guess as they say on all the news analysis shows, only time will tell. You can tell me what you think down in the down in the comment section. And before I finish the show, Sandy's been sleeping down there during most of the show. Dash has come back and forth. I didn't get a contemporaneous Dash and Sandy clip, but here is one I created this morning while I was watching Meet the Press. You hear a little Meet the Press in the background, and then I think there's some advertisement in the background. And kind of like Alfred Hitchcock, somebody pointed out, I sort of push Sandy into the frame during this final Dash and Sandy clip that will end the show tonight over here. So that's the Dash and Sandy clip. Before I end the show, I do want to thank my Super Chat contributors, at least the ones I saw before when I had time to take a screenshot. Here they are this week. Thanks Lulu Girl and Nelson 100 for their Super Chat contributions, since I don't get a lot of advertising revenue from YouTube anymore. Also down in the video description there's a link to become a patron on Patreon. At the $5 level you get one of these #LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl stickers. At the $10 level you get this ACLU Constitution and the sticker, and at the $15 level I will be printing out new t-shirts at the beginning of the new year that there'll be white t-shirts with this in red, something similar to what you see on the #LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker. Down in the video description you can find links to my PayPal direct contribution site as well. And anyway, that is the last Liberal Viewer live stream of 2019, of the decade, of the year 2019, of the 2010s decade, I guess. And I will be back next week and for every week for the foreseeable future, picking out the best clips, giving my commentary and criticism, spending 8 to 10 hours every Sunday doing this for your information and edification. And until next week, or when I have some reason to upload a edited, produced video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.